What is going on, A to Z Sports? Sam Phelan here with you for Titans at 2, recapping the press conference that went on earlier today here on a Wednesday afternoon. But we did have a press conference earlier with Titans head coach Brian Callahan, offensive coordinator Nick Holz, and defensive coordinator Dennard Wilson. They all spoke, talked about roster construction a little bit, talked about the NFL draft a little bit, talked about the initial reaction and their initial assessment of the players on the Titans roster because the offseason program has begun. The Titans are in the building. They are practicing and going through their offseason program. So, what are their thoughts on the players on the roster? How do they feel about the roster going into the draft? What additions could be made? I have a couple of takeaways, one from Brian Callahan, one from Nick Holz, one from Dennard Wilson that we will discuss this afternoon here on Titans at 2. I'll start with the Titans head coach. I will start with Brian Callahan, who made a couple of interesting comments. Really a very long, very insightful press conference. The thing went for about an hour total. So there's a ton of content, a ton of things that I found very useful information. So what kind of things stood out among this group? Well, number one, I talked to Brian Callahan and asked him about wide receiver, the wide receiver position. Where are the Titans at wide receiver now that they've added Calvin Ridley to their receiving core? Are they open to making an addition? And what kind of player would they target if so? I found this rather interesting.
To add them to those spots, I mean, we have to have someone emerge for us at the slot position receiver when we're in 11 personnel. That's one that we got some young players I'm excited to take a look at with obviously Kyle Phillips. Mason Kinsey's been around here a little bit. He's shown his mettle. Obviously, Nick Westbrook-Akine has been involved in some of those spots over his career. So trying to find someone to emerge in that spot. You got guys that you're trying to always build youth and depth as well. And so those things are in constant flux. You're always trying to have another guy ready to roll. You need depth at every position. It's not just the receivers, but you're always open to those guys. And again, guys that are fast, explosive, and physical, you can't have enough of them.
Guys that are fast, explosive, and physical, you can't have enough of them. Brian Callahan absolutely leaving the door open, maybe for a Titans addition at wide receiver, and specifically refers to slot receiver as an area the Titans need to get better. I think it's interesting. He mentions Kyle Phillips. He mentions Nick Westbrook-Akine. He goes as far as to mention Mason Kinsey as somebody who has been around and maybe he's looking to emerge as a slot guy. And he does not mention Treylon Burks. Now, the slot was a role that I thought Treylon Burks might slide into Brian Callahan's offense. It's something he did at Arkansas a lot more frequently than he has at the NFL and had some success doing that. But Treylon Burks not mentioned by Brian Callahan. The real question here, and the question that will continue to be asked for the next 2 weeks leading up to the NFL draft, is do the Titans want a slot receiver to emerge so much from inside the team, or are they willing to go and get it elsewhere? Are they willing to go and use a top draft pick on that guy? I mean, when you hear Brian Callahan talk about, hey, we need a slot, and then you hear Brian Callahan talk about guys that are fast and explosive, I can't help but think of a handful of draft prospects, some of them even in the first round, with a guy like Malik Neighbors, who could fit that role, a guy who's played both inside and outside at LSU and could fit that role and really take this offense to the next level. Will that happen? I'm not sure, but certainly the Titans not ruling it out. And the other area that Brian Callahan all but said, we are looking to make an addition, is the defensive line, the edge rusher defensive line spot, a spot that I think most Titans fans, most Titans media members would agree needs some more depth. You probably need another starter there to help out with Jeffrey Simmons, another 3-down guy, possibly your replacement for Denico Autry maybe. And while Dennard Wilson said emphatically that Sebastian Joseph Day can play anywhere on the defensive line, Brian Callahan says they are still in the building phases of the defensive line, looking to add more talent.
Yeah, it's a position that's still in in this building phase. You know, we got guys that we feel good about, but you know, just like any front, offensive or defensive front, you're never going to turn down good players that can bolster that. You know, it always is going to start and end there. If you can play physical in the trenches, you're going to have a chance to be a pretty good football team. And so those are always areas we're going to look to add players, even when we might have what we think is a good front, in which we do. There's always going to be opportunities to keep adding to it, because all I know is when you play against a team that seems to kind of come at you in waves and every player they put out there can play, that's a lot of stress on an offense from my perspective. So yeah, the more guys you have that can rush from inside and outside, the stouter you play against the run, that's an area that you're always looking to keep adding good players to.
So Brian Callahan said the Titans think they have a good defensive front, but really the key words there for me are building phase. You refer to your defensive line in the building phase. I think you're still looking to add players. So, I mean, look in the second round here for the Titans. That seems to be the pick right at number 38 that I'm starting to feel stronger and stronger about. Like the Titans might end up making a move for a defensive lineman. They do have some good pieces up front. They do have Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry and Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day. But they could certainly use to add to that group even more. So slot wide receiver, potentially a spot to add. Defensive line, definitely a spot that we're looking to add. The rest of the defense, as far as they are concerned, I mean, the secondary, you feel really good about. And Brian Callahan, Dennard Wilson both feel really good about after the additions of L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie in free agency. Bring those guys in with Roger McCreary and Amani Hooker and Elijah Molden. It feels like a really strong secondary. Maybe not the top of the needs list, but the one question I continue to ask, and Titans fans everywhere continue to ask, what are you doing at inside linebacker and who is your green dot? Defensive coordinator Dennard Wilson said the Titans right now really aren't worried about a green dot, which I suppose checks out from Brian Callahan or Ran Carthon's previous comments. GM Ran Carthon spoke at a recent press conference and said that it might not even be an inside linebacker who is the communicator of a defense. But I did have somewhat of a takeaway from how Dennard Wilson spoke about Kenneth Murray, the recently signed inside linebacker for the Titans. He's bullish on Kenneth Murray and his defense. I think there is an argument to be made for Kenneth Murray to be really successful in Dennard Wilson's defense, but I think his limitations are evident when you just listen to the defensive coordinator talk about him.
Well, we're not focused on the green dot right now. I think that's up to guys getting out there and performing, seeing how much information they can retain first and foremost. But the thing with Kenneth is, just like when he came out of college, you saw the explosive. He's a big man. He's athletic. He's smart. He can make all the plays. For us, our thought process is to put him in a position to allow him to play free, to cut it loose, so he doesn't have to think as much right now. And as we start to let him go out there and cut it loose and he plays fast and physical in the head of plays, then you give him the other responsibilities. But right now, it's about him being the best version of himself, the good self, all right, and trying to maximize his potential so when he goes out and play, he plays free.
So I think you talk about Kenneth Murray right there, and really what he is in this defense and his limitations in this defense can be really well described and broken down just based off of Dennard Wilson's comments. He is huge. He's a big linebacker. He's very fast, very physical, is able to play downhill, effective against the run. For a Dennard Wilson defense that I think has a plan of, playing downhill, playing aggressive, a thumping linebacker like Kenneth Murray is valuable. If you have a strong defensive front, if they continue to bolster their defensive line, and you have cornerbacks in L'Jarius Sneed and Chidobe Awuzie who are physical and can play press man at the line of scrimmage and force be good against quick pass game, you've really made life a lot easier for your inside linebackers. And Kenneth Murray's life can be a lot easier, and I think he can thrive in that spot. But if you have an inside linebacker who your main goal is to make him not have to think as much, which is what Dennard Wilson says, I think it's pretty realistic to expect that guy is not going to be wearing the green dot and is not fit to be the communicator of your defense, at least not right now. So, is it Otis Reese? I don't necessarily think so. Is it Kenneth Murray? I definitely don't think so. I think Rand Carthon probably was onto something when he said it doesn't have to be an inside linebacker. For me, look for Amani Hooker to be the green dot of the Titans defense and be the communicator for them. But that was a big takeaway for a guy who I think has a lot of potential to shine, but a clear limitation in what his abilities are as a communicator as well, with Kenneth Murray on this new Titans defense. Shifting over to the other side of the ball, offensive side of the ball, one position that I really don't feel has been talked about enough is right guard. I know that comes out of left field, but we know who the Titans quarterback is going to be. We know what their running backs are going to look like. We generally know what their wide receivers are and have a couple questions about wide receiver. And the question that is always asked is, who are your tackles? Who is your left tackle and who is your right tackle? And both of them may come in the NFL draft. And I still think that's a realistic possibility. But if you look at the Titans depth chart, I think there's an interesting question of who is your right guard. You have Peter Skoronski at left guard. You have Lloyd Cushenberry at center. And then you have a grouping of returning players, Daniel Brunskill, Dylan Radins, two of them, that could make a case to be your right guard. But there is a new free agent signing, a low-risk, low-money free agent signing in Sadique Charles, that offensive coordinator Nick Holz. I asked him about Sadique Charles. He says he thinks he might be a starting offensive lineman.
He's really a power player, right? You looked at him in Washington, and when he came off the ball, you could really see that. For us, he's attractive because if we can get that kind of level of play consistently, he's a starting guard in the NFL, and to get him how we got him and get him as quickly as we did and get him lined up. And now we're just really excited. Randy Jordan had been with him, and he spoke very highly of him, and Bill really enjoyed the tape, and we all did. So it was really, really cool.
Nothing guaranteed because there will obviously be a competition here, but interesting. Nick Holtz says starting caliber guard in the NFL, if he can play consistently. Randy Jordan has worked with him before, new Titans coach Randy Jordan there, and then new offensive line coach Bill Callahan, big fan of the tape as well. So this staff sees something in Sadique Charles that they believe they can mold. As Brian Callahan said as well, talking about his father, Bill Callahan, he's got a pretty good track record when it comes to finding a guy that he thinks fits the scheme, picking him out of a lineup, and then applying it to the offense. So early favorite, maybe you could make the case for Sadique Charles to be the Titans starting right guard. It's also worth noting that he was college teammates with Lloyd Cushenberry, so some familiarity there and some chemistry potentially between the two of them as the Titans try and figure out who's starting up front. Still potentially, as I said, 2 tackles coming in the draft or free agency to round that group out. But getting a little bit more intrigued than interested in Sadique Charles. That's all I've got for you guys today. Don't be afraid, and please do leave a like on that show before you head out of here. I would really appreciate it. I will be back either at the end of this week or the top of next week to do more draft preview content here. We are closing in on the NFL draft, just 2 weeks away by the time that you're watching this. So we're going to have all of the content. I'll have a mock draft coming out on A2ZSports.com. Don't forget to check that out as well. Till next time, tighten up. I'll see you guys later.